Good day, kings and queens. Welcome to another video. In this video, we'll be discussing backward pawns, and this will basically be a very long series. So to begin with, if you're a player that plays the Banco Gambit, this is the Banco Gambit pawn structure. The pawn here on e7 is known as a backward pawn. If you play, this is the Sicilian Sveshnikov pawn structure. The pawn on d6 is known as a backward pawn, and here this is the Benoni structure as well, also some type of Banco. The pawn on d6 is also known as a backward pawn, and this is the Nimzo Indian pawn structure. Sometimes there's a pawn here on c7, but the the d7 pawn here is also known as a backward pawn. Now, we're going to be investigating in this series what backward pawns are, and hopefully you can learn right along with me as we go. So let's begin with backward pawns. What are backward pawns and how can we describe them? First things, we're going to have to give meaning to what backward pawns are. So by definition, backward pawns are usually found on the second rank and the third rank, right? That's where you're normally going to find backward pawns in a game of chess. Now, two things that we're going to be looking at throughout the series is what I'll call the strategic elements. This would be one, and two, the dynamic elements. Now, to begin with the strategic elements, we need to understand what this is. So number one, it is the weakness of the pawn itself because it's backwards. It's usually a weakness. Number two, it is a square in front of it, basically under strategic elements. So we have two things under strategic elements. So the weakness of the pawn and the square in front of it. And these things are important to bear in mind because we're going to discuss them further down in detail. Now, when you come here, we have the dynamic elements, which are born from the strategic nature of the pawn or of the position. Now we have passivity, which is the side that has the backward pawns. There's lack of piece activity, as the backward pawns must always be defended, so that's passive. So obviously, because there's passivity, that means there's also less piece mobility because the pieces are usually cramped and are behind the backward pawns. And then obviously there's less space for the side with the backward pawns, meaning the person with the better side would have more space, contrary to being having the backward pawns, right? There's pros and cons. And then of course the better side will always have what we call the initiative. So by definition, now we have defined what backward pawns are, and now I will take you to this game over here. Well, not a game just yet, however, we're going to transition now. We're going to transition into this position over here where we will look at what backward pawns are from a more analytical perspective, so to speak. So in this position, as you see here, this is the Sicilian Sveshnikov structure. Sorry about that. So to discuss quickly the strategic elements, right? This is the backward pawn here on d6. This is a very weak pawn. Now it's backward because it's like we said, it's on the third rank. It's over here, right? And then what else do we know about this pawn? Sorry about that. There's a square in front of this pawn, which is the d5 square. Now this is a weak square for the defending side, black in this instance, and it's a strong square for the white pieces, right? So for instance, if white had, let's say, a knight right here on c3, right? This becomes an outpost square and the knight can land there and sort of blockade this pawn and then later build up pressure down the e file, maybe even with c4, c5, something like that, just to try and win this pawn in a strategic battle. That's how that would usually go about, right? So now, those are the two strategic elements. They're usually found in the second and the third rank. That's one. Number two, there's a square in front of the pawn. Now, these are the two most important things that we need to basically know from a strategic point of view. And now we will look at some games, grandmaster games, classical games, that will explain better, or rather demonstrate how to treat positions with backward pawns. Now, throughout the series, we'll look at how to utilize backward pawns when you're the defending side and how to exploit them when you're the stronger side. Now, to begin the series, we'll first, of course, start with the stronger side, as we have discussed, that the stronger side would normally have what we call the initiative, right? The stronger side would have the initiative. if the weaker side has less space, the stronger side obviously means they have more space. If the weaker side has less piece mobility, it means the stronger side has more piece mobility. And if the other side is passive, the other side is active. And this, we need to learn how to generate attacks and hopefully convert the game in a favorable manner. So we're gonna quickly dive into a game. Game number one, it's gonna be an old classical game that we're gonna go through. Now this game that we're gonna go through is Mikhail Tal versus Kuprechik Victor, right? As you can see there, let me show the clocks. Just give me a minute for that. Okay, there we go. I think the clocks should be appearing. Yes, there they are. Okay. Let me just quickly get that sorted out. Okay, yes. So here in this game, we have Tal, who has the white pieces. Then we have Kurprechik, Victor, with the black pieces, right? So now, when we begin our investigation, I'm just gonna walk you through the game and explain basically how to utilize backward pawns, what it is that you must look for, and sort of try to dissect this game for you guys. So without further ado, let's dive into it, right? So Tal here had the white pieces. He plays e4. His opponent plays c5, knight f3, g6. This is the accelerated, hyper accelerated dragon variation actually, and then just d4. So cd, knight d4, and then bishop g7, and now c4. This is principle, right? You will notice, or you will know, that in modern chess, there's this move order finesse. I'll just kind of digress here a bit. There's this sort of a finesse move order, if you will, where you play like this and you induce white to play knight c3 and then play g6 because you do not want them playing c4, right? That's sort of the new modern way of playing it. But back in the day, they didn't really care. This was 1970. This game was played in Sochi, I believe. Yes, it was Sochi GM versus Young Masters. That was the game. So anyway, CD, knight D, bishop G7, C4. This is known as the Maroczy bind because white has a strong bind in the center. Now, bear with me here. We will get to our backward pawn positions. Knight T6, bishop B3, knight H6. Now, this idea is designed to basically thrust forward F5 and challenge white's strong center, right? Like the grip that white has in the center. So that's what that is for, knight h6. It's a typical idea, very old, still playable, still some modern games of grandmasters playing this, but that's not what we're here to investigate. So d6, knight c3, castles, short castles as well. I won't go into like variations and all this other crazy stuff because we are here just to investigate what are backward pawns. So f5, now there it is. So now you will quickly notice that the e7 pawn, the d6 pawn form sort of a pawn blob or a pawn island, but this is a backward pawn, right? So what have we discussed? Usually a backward pawn is backwards. It's found either on the second rank, on the initial position, or on their third rank. In this case, we have a backward pawn right here on e7, and we have a square right in front of it, which can be utilized by white's pieces as some form of outpost, right? So f5 is on the board, e takes on f5, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, bishop takes d4, queen takes d4, knight takes f5. Now, I won't go into other variations that exist. That's a different video, I suppose. We are just here to, as I said, as you can tell by the title, to investigate what backward pawns are. And this is game one of those. So queen d2. Now, when you look at this position, now it's more clear how black's position is and these hanging pawns here, right? It's more clear what's going on now. So after queen d2, bishop d7 was played. Now here Tal begins demonstrating the strategic sort of approach one needs to take when having backward pawns, right? He plays bishop f3. Now the idea is built up, centered around the fact that these squares are weak and they need to be occupied by white's pieces, right? Rook here to support that, rook here to support that, move out the queen out of the way because the queen is a better piece when it supports an attack and not when it's in front, right? It should be a supporting piece. So now bishop c6, and a brilliant move from the great Mikhail Tal, playing bishop d5. And I should say here, Tal was known as an attacking player, sacking pieces, but he for me, he was also just, I mean, a great player in every aspect. Maybe not too positional, but in these games he demonstrates positional understanding of chess, basically. So bishop d5, a brilliant move. Now you start to see white causing problems and pounding down on the fact that he has a backward e7 pawn, right? The square in front of the pawn is weak. We have a piece on d5 occupying an outpost, and then also ensuring that the square is monitored by white's pieces. And now if something like e5 were to come, right, if black were to play e5, this now becomes the backward pawn, right? So let me just quickly show you how that would look. Let's say e5 here. Oh, so this is check. Okay, let's just move the king to the side. I'm just gonna try to give white random moves and black random, and let's say e5. Now you'll realize that, oh, okay, now this pawn is actually a backwards pawn, and we already have a piece here, right? So hence the move bishop d5 check is such a brilliant move. And then king g7, rook e1, rook f e1, and the point is to mount a pressure on the e file and play basically against the backward pawn here on e7, right? This is positional chess. And here, Kuprechik actually plays e5, right? Sort of getting rid of the backward pawn, but not really getting rid of it, because like I said, now that the position is transformed with e5, now this d6 pawn is a backward pawn, right? Like, so by definition, we already established that you either find them on the second rank or on the third rank. In this case now, we have a transformation where the backward pawn is on the third rank, right? Okay, good, perfect. Now that is what e5 is doing. He's trying to get rid of this backward pawns, maybe, and maybe, I don't know, play knight e7 here to kick the bishop out, but then you can just keep the pressure there. Now Tal immediately understands that this pawn is a weakness, and so is this pawn, and he plays a second brilliant move, and that move is c5, right? Breaking the pawn chain, this pawn chain over here, so that e5 pawn will further be weak. This c5 pawn doesn't really scare anybody, and he has more space, right? The evil bar kind of says it's equal, of course, but like from a strategic point of view and sort of principle play, this makes sense. So Tal's opponent played d takes on c5, rook takes on e5, and then the position just started collapsing. Also, you will notice that this white king is I mean, this black king is kind of suspect right here on g7. It's not really safe. And look at who has complete dominance in the center, right? It is white. This rook here is sort of sleeping, and Tau basically just goes to town and demonstrate good attacking skills, as we famously know him to be an attacking player. Queen was played queen to d6, rook a e1, basically double stacking on the e file, and then rook e8 contesting the e file, rook e6, right? Not exchanging, because then you, if you exchange, you would cede control of the e file. Now, this is another thing that is important to mention here, is that the backward pawns usually, the I could say the advantage usually materializes into something else, right? The backward pawns, black got rid of his backward pawns and is happy, but in doing so has ceded basically the whole center to the white army, right? White is just completely dominant in the center, and if you're winning in the center, you're probably most likely going to win the game. He has king safety over here. Black's king is not really that safe. So this is what basically the strategic elements sort of like transform into. Backward pawns transform into other forms of pawns, isolated pawns, pawn coupled pawn islands, and all of that stuff. We're going to get into all of that in later videos. This is going to be a very, very lengthy series. I hope to cover most of these pawn themes maybe in like the next 3 months or so. So stick around. They're going to be great. There's going to be great instructive content coming your way in terms of that. So rook e6 anyway. Rook takes, queen d7, right? Queen f4, going immediately for the dark squares, right? Because they're weak. The queen is going to arrive there. And then bishop takes on d5, queen check first, and then knight, rook f6 check, king g7, g8, and then knight takes, right? And already you will see that the black pieces aren't equipped to deal with the assault from the white pieces, right? And the king is sort of, he's entombed, not really entombed, but he's covered by the white army, and there isn't really much defenses. This knight here on f5 is doing nothing. This knight just landed on f5 after going to h6, and it's been there until forever, basically until the kingdom falls. It will do nothing. It will just stay on f5. Queen a4, which is also a very, very big mistake. I mean, this is the type of one move type of thinking moves, looking for a bankrupt mate here on d1. But again, moving the queen away, the opponent was just succumbing to pressure, because you have 3 pieces staring at the king, and you decide to move the most powerful piece to defend the king away from basically the king. So it's a very bad play, but again, it was just already miserable for him to play. It was just going to materialize slowly, and Tal demonstrated. So here, just a simple h3 will do, right? And this, of course, is just creating lift for the king. No need to be in a hurry or give checks on e6 whatsoever. This is a winning position, and Tal understands that. He understood that basically. And then rook d8, and as you can tell the evil bar by how skyrocket high it's going, this is a blunder in view of rook takes on f5, and the opponent resigned, right? The opponent resigned here because there really isn't a good way to stop the incoming assault, right? So for example, if just g takes, I believe here there's first is it 97, or is it queen e6 check first? Yes, I think it's queen e6 check, right? Yes, it's queen e6 check. Now the king can go here or here. So if the king, let's say, goes here, you have queen here check, king there, knight there check, king there, and then mate, right? It's just a mating pattern basically. And so after this check, if king goes here, same thing, you just push the king away like that, right? Nothing changes. In fact, this is a quicker mate even. So after rook takes on f5, Tal's opponent, Koprechik, Victor, he resigned. So what can we take away from this game? Number one, as soon as there was the backward pawn, right? I'll take you to this position after queen d2, right? As soon as basically the backward pawn actually started forming from f5, but as soon as there was this backward pawn, white utilized his pieces, right, to occupy the d5 square, which is a strong outpost, and then supported it with rooks on the open files, right? And he also had the initiative. So these are the things we spoke about, like the dynamic elements that we had discussed shortly in the presentation that I showed you guys. So that's game number one. Now we go to game number two. Now game number two is probably one of my favorite players, Larsen. Larsen used to play some amazing chess, amazing chess. Now we will look at this game number two by Larsen. We'll also be looking at the Sicilian defense in this regard. Actually, it doesn't really start as a Sicilian, but it's still a Sicilian. This was also 1970, and it's very instructive. This is a classical game. So knight f3 was played, and then c5 on the board, c4, knight c6, d4, cd, knight d, g6, and then e4. Same thing, right? This is the Maroczy bind. Now we have transposed into the Sicilian accelerated dragon, basically hyper accelerated dragon, that is. So bishop d7, bishop e3. This is pretty standard. d6, knight c3, knight h6, bishop e2, short castles, f5. Same idea, right? Same idea. Takes, but now in this game, Larson plays G takes F instead of knight takes on F, right? He's gonna be looking for play like knight jumping into G4 and stuff like that. That's what he's gonna be looking for in this game. So now here's an interesting move that Salzburg plays, and Salzburg here, he is it Salzburg or Salzburg? I don't know. I think the S or the Z is silent. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, you'll forgive me for that. He plays something super interesting, right? It's a very interesting move. It looks counterintuitive, but the more you look into it, it makes sense, and it's all formed, or rather played, with the intention of playing against this e7 backward pawn, because immediately when black played f5, the e7 pawn became a backward pawn, right? So this is the move, f4, right? And you sit and you think, wait a minute, does that not block in this e3 bishop? Yes and no, because technically once the knight moves, for example, once the knight moves, this bishop can come alive here on d4, can drop back to f2 maybe. It's a good supporting bishop, and also the e file is not really open, so there's not really, you don't have to really worry about like the rook coming in here and just embarrassing the bishop here on e3. You don't have to worry about that. But this move is brilliant because in the previous game you will remember that e7 e5 was played and d6 became the backward pawn. But now in this game, f4 number one stops the move e5 kind of because now if you play e5 and we exchange and then this happens, this exchange happens, right, you will be left with 2 pawns hanging on f and e, and the king is just suspicious, and then there's no g pawn as well. I mean, this will be miserable positionally, right? So f4 is quite a brilliant move. It's designed to stop e5 and further rendering the e7 pawn weak. Now let's see how sort of Salzburg demonstrate how to play against the backward pawn, right? So that's why it's important to understand these pawn structures, because they inform the strategic approach to which one player must treat the position, right? It can be borderline the decision maker in a person winning the game or losing the game. So you have to understand this type of positional chess. And that's why I'm sharing this with you, because this is what I'm also venturing into as a chess player, as I'm recovering and I'm learning and all of that and improving. I'm just sharing my journey with you and what I've learned so far. So anyway, getting back to the game, bishop d7, right? Queen d2, okay? Knight f3, I mean knight g4. The bishop goes to take the knight immediately, because you need to understand that this bishop is an important piece as it supports and holds the center together. This bishop is kind of blocked in here on e2 and doesn't really do anything. So white is more than happy to give up the bishop pair for the strong knight on g4, because that was the idea of taking with the g pawn on oh nope, with the g pawn, I mean. When black took with the pawn on f5 with the g pawn instead of the knight, the idea was always to come and prop the knight on g4 and just sort of having a strong bind here, right? So white is more than happy to actually do this trade with bishop g4. It's a good move. F takes, and now you will sort of see that the king is weak. It's also looking suspect. I mean, it's still almost equal according to the engine. It's like plus 0.85, 0.81. It's a very small advantage, but like black is overextended and white is soon gonna arrive. So what does white play? Knight d5. There you go. Already occupying the outpost in front of this pawn, right? It's not yet like a backward pawn, so just per se, the d6 pawn. But like if black plays something like e6, this pawn is already weak. And this pawn is even further weak, and it can't really land on e5 without being captured, right? So knight d5, brilliant move. Rook f7, f5. Now this is a brilliant move as well, because it further clamps down on this square in front of the backward pawn on e7, right? It's excuse me, it's strengthening the position of the white pieces and the dominance in the center, right? White is the only guy having fun in this game. Black literally has nothing. So king h8, I think here a series of trades would have sort of eased up the pressure, just so that you remove a couple of pieces, I guess, because you see, once you have a position like this, you want to remove as much pieces on the board as possible to sort of relieve or alleviate the pressure that you are facing from the attacking side, and maybe try to hold an endgame, but probably the ensuing endgame is also lost for black, basically because of just how the pawn structure is and the play that white will have, basically. And because white has these open files here, right, this semi-open file, this semi-open file, this file, I mean, white has everything. Black's got nothing except passivity. That's it. His pieces are just passive, right? They're not active. These are the dynamic elements you spoke about. So anyway, knight to d5, there you go, another very instructive moment. Pieces in front of the backward pawn, strengthening the d5 square, attacking the queen, hitting the bishop. Now this bishop all of a sudden becomes a monster, because once this bishop dies, if he does not take, now you have a black king on with a dark square weakness complex, and you have a queen and you have a bishop that can actually go to the squares. I mean, this is just crushing. It's crushing. So queen to g8, and of course, as I said, knight takes on g7, good move. Queen takes on g7, knight takes on e7. Therefore, now tactics now are flying, right? Knight takes on e7 because of f6, forking the queen with the knight. Gets the piece back. The rook stage other. The rook takes. Bishop d4 check, right? Exploiting that dark square color complex weakness, and then king g8. Rook f6 hits the queen. Queen h5. Rook a f1. g3, but then there's just nothing there. Just takes, and this is plus like 6. I think, yeah, it's plus 6, plus 8 or something like that. White is just winning. This is a miserable position. And all of this materialized from having a backward pawn. Bishop e6, queen f4, rook f7, g4. And black resigned. Black resigned. We won't further discuss this position, but now I'd like to share my own personal game that I played not so long ago. This was a Sicilian Sveshnikov as well, and I will sort of try and demonstrate me trying to put these lessons in action in my very own games. So this was a one-day game I played against Javozosa or something like that, or Vazosa. I don't know. He's a guy from the United States, and in this game I had the white pieces, and you guys know by now I'm an e4 player, so I played e4. He goes c5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, takes, e5. This is the official Sveshnikov Sicilian, right? Chess.com, basically, the database says this is the Lowenthal variation. I didn't know that. I just know it as Sicilian Sveshnikov. Knight b5, mainline sort of. Yeah, it says Kalishnikov variation now. And then knight c3, right? Standard stuff. a6, knight a3, and then knight f6, bishop g5, bishop e7 was an inaccuracy from my opponent. Then I played bishop takes on f6. This is playable. Bishop takes on f6. And then I immediately went into knight d5. This was not a good move. And the point is, you will quickly see, right? Usually there's this idea of b5, b4. And here I can immediately go for knight c4, attacking this backward pawn twice, right? So actually, let's take basically stock of what just happened. Black has a backward pawn on d6. White, I have this pawn here on e4. It's controlling the square in front of the backward pawn. Very important, right? And then I have a knight that can jump in there and become an outpost, right? So in some lines, maybe black plays bishop e6, tries to break free with f5 to weaken the outpost here. Maybe I struck back with c4, but then there's b5, then maybe b3 again, strengthening c4 and creating this chain, right? It might be hard for you to keep up with all of this, but I'm just trying to bring to your attention the ideas that exist that you have to be thinking about when you're playing against a backward pawn like this on d6, right? So I can go off the books here and I go for knight d5. Engine hates this move. Knight c4 was best, but I missed it. And now we're back to total equality. Bishop g5, which I thought was a very interesting continuation. A very, very interesting continuation. So actually, just to quickly show you a line, After knight d5, right, my opponent basically went bishop g5, but there's an interesting line with bishop e6. So after bishop e6, knight c4, headed for the b3 square, right? I'm headed for the b3 square over there. And then if castles, just head into b4, create a nice stronghold on that, and also reinforcing the knight here. And if that were to go maybe bishop c4, this is how play basically could have went. And you can see how white sort of occupies all these holes, and this is also a backward pawn. Now this is also a backward pawn. These are pawn islands, basically, both of these pawns. But we won't go into this sort of deep analysis, even though the engine says it's still equal. But this is how play could have gone, right? So anyway, he goes bishop g5, I go c3 here. I guess I was just worried about knight c4 things, but I shouldn't have been. But c3 is actually quite an okay move. Castles, knight c4, b5. I still went knight b8, which was the best move. Rook b8, best move. Then I took the light squared bishop, and then he took my knight, of course. Then queen h5 just hits the bishop here, develops the queen. A very good move as well, and in fact, it was the best move. f6 was a blunder by my opponent. Grandmaster Feingold would be screaming at this point. Played h4, just dislodging the coordination of the pieces there a bit. And then after g6, then you just get back. I just get back with queen f3. So now you will see that there's all these weaknesses created here on the king side, right? Because he's trying to get some breathing room, and this knight is just in his face on d5, just holding the position together, controlling some key squares in black's position, right? He's not really allowing black to do anything, or even maybe just bringing the bishop here, right? I'm just taking control, taking space, slow play. Bishop h6, and here I go g5, right? I mean h5, which is still a good move. Now here it's plus like 1 point something for white, and the point is, if he closes the center, basically, I mean this with g5, I just have g4, knight can swing back to e3, and then now occupy f5, maybe try to break this queen side pawns here with a4 or something like that, position the bishop here, or head for c4 over here, right? There are a lot of ideas that you can sort of try to play around, but now that would be worse for black. And my opponent actually goes for g5, which was, I found interesting, and you can tell by the engine it's a really bad move. The advantage now even goes further to white. Then knight e3, I quickly rewrite my knight to put it on f5, and then he decides now, okay, you know what, let me just sacrifice the pawn, otherwise I'm not gonna have play. Because if he sits around, let's say queen d7, I'm gonna go knight g4, bishop here, h6, bishop there, and just try to occupy the square, and he's not going to have play at all, right? I can even go about it this way, and in fact I think this would be much better. Knight here instead, and if there, don't even take the knight, play h6, and then there, and then just solidify the knight on that square. This is just crushing. There's rook here, right? We're not going to allow him to get counterplay on d5. This would be just completely winning for white. It'll be slow, take some time to convert, but is absolutely winning. So that was after g5, and then he sacks the pawn here on g4. This is where we're at, which is a good move from him. Here, the engine wanted me already to sort of take on g4, exchanging, right? I'm welcoming the exchange, because this is like already much better for white, right? And here I could play like rook a to d1, just hit this pawn over here, it can't move, and then maybe rook here defending, I don't know. Then I can try to like let me see. For now this is fine, maybe break apart the defenses with a4. I think yes, this could work, right? This knight is kind of not really doing anything here, but that's how play could have basically gone. That's how play could have gone. So after g4, I did not take with the queen. I took with the knight, which is an inaccuracy, but it's still playable. I wanted to just basically play on, and also it kind of hits the bishop with tempo. That's why now bishop g5. I thought that was pretty wise of me to do. And then just h6, right? I just take space. This can be an asset. And also what this does, long-term thinking, when the bishop comes out here, right? Or which I did in the game through this way, that way, and this way, the h7 pawn becomes weak, right? This bishop is shut out of the game. I mean, it has this diagonal, but like there's nothing here. It's just sitting there doing nothing. That's why this position is so much better for white. White has all the space. But now, after h6, I have to contend with f5. But f5, the immediate f5 is not really playable. It's not a good move, because I think if f5 just takes, and then maybe if takes, I have this queen check over here, then I have this nasty rook left as well, because now I think, okay, the knight would be hanging, but after f3, I mean, okay, then that will weaken the dark squares, but like there's so much play for white, right? That's the point. So he goes b4. I ignore that. Rook a1, best move. B takes on c3. B takes on c3. I'm more than happy, because all of this is designed to play at least something like c4, strengthening this, maybe exchange this pawn for that pawn. I don't know. We'll see as the game goes. So he plays queen e6. Not the best move. Then I grab the pawn on a6. He gives the pawn on a2. I was happy with this trade. And then now queen d3, right? Centralizing the pieces and just gunning for all these squares, because he has a white square complex weakness, so to speak, black. And I want to sort of like reroute my bishop, like I said, this way and that way, and just eye this pawn here on h7 and just clamp down on the square. In fact, if once I land here, the knight is sort of free to go about on its journey of discovery. I don't know to where, but like sort of change plans, right? I can play that. So king h8 steps out of the way, bishop c4, good move, best move by the way. And I'm starting to also demonstrate the understanding of playing against this backward pawn, right? Here, by the way, I cannot take on d6, because then my queen, I mean, I leave the bishop hanging here. So first I have to play bishop c4. Bishop c4 protects now the pawn, right? Now the pawn is no longer hanging, because if takes, I mean, if white takes, then you do not take the queen back, but you take on c3 check, because my king is still in the center, right? I didn't practically castle in this game, but okay. So I don't take. I actually now castle, right? Stepping out of the check and the nonsense. And now I'm just gonna go harass him, because this is just weak. These pieces are weak. They're uncoordinated. Rook A. I mean rook B d8. Rook a1. Queen c5. Rook b1, just taking control of the files, nothing fancier. And you can see that this is a winning position for white. I didn't convert it in the most clean style, but this was still playable. So my opponent goes rook b8. Now rook b5, a bit of an inaccuracy, but I wanted something like takes, then just c6, and then just try to like use this open a file and harass him from behind, basically. That sounds wrong, but okay. So here I was supposed to go. Basically, I was right. I was supposed to continue with my plan. Bishop e6, right? If takes, if and then if black takes, like takes for example, just take, relax, nothing fancy. If he hits maybe my, I don't know, let's just say rook e8, then finally I arrive on f5. I was supposed to go with this plan, but somehow I diverted from the initial plan, and I started playing things like rook b5. Not the most accurate, but okay, still winning because of the space that white has. Maybe not as much winning, but yeah, it is not really a good way to go about it. Knight e7, rook a6 hits the pawn, and now he gets rid of his backward pawn, but this ensuing position is winning for white. I immediately took queen takes, I went for the exchange, knight takes, c3, now a pass pawn has been minted, all because of backward pawns and bad piece coordination by my opponent. This position is winning. I went on actually to convert this in a great way. So knight c7, rook c6 hits the knight, knight takes, pawn takes. Now the pawn is marching. Now the bishop, this is a dark square that I'm promoting on. The bishop is a dark square, the bishop, but it doesn't really have time to sort of protect all these squares, right? There's no time. It's going to be difficult because of these pawns, right? It's going to be difficult. So b takes on b5. Now he starts bringing his king back into the game, but it's a little bit too late. b6 best move, king e7, b7, right? So now he has to play timely, because here if he went like let's say something like rook here, I believe, right? If he played something like rook there, I think at this juncture I could have played what was gonna be my move. I can't really remember what was the plan, but I thought to myself, oh, I could just actually grab the pawn here, and then bishop takes, and then rook takes. And yeah, that was just completely losing. So he first had to play his king out on f7, but then the pawn now arrives on b7. Now here again, he cannot play something like f5, because then just rook c8 winning. Then I promote on the next move here on b8. So rook b8, passive rook, but it's needed. It's an ugly move. It's necessary. It holds the position together. It takes away rook c8, because now if I play rook c8, the idea doesn't work because of rook b7 check. I mean, rook b7 takes. I mean, rook takes on b7, doesn't have to take my rook, and the king is now here. Whereas in this position, if the king was backward, for example, maybe let's just say I don't know, let's say maybe king back, b7, then here, right? I could play this with check at least, right? I could play this with check, but now there's none of that, because my opponent played king f7. He understood that he needed to get his king active and from the bank rank. So b7, rook there. Oh, now rook c7 check, right? King there, rook b g7 check, king out, rook f3. I'm chilling, right? There's nothing white can do, black can do. Just f3, solidifying the position. He cannot play f3 because then this pawn falls. And then once he takes that, actually, think I could take the bishop. Can I take the bishop? No. I can't take the bishop. But there's knight c5, just hitting that, and then after moving away, I'm gonna promote, and then this bishop will have to put itself here to capture there. But then I'm gonna be a piece up in eventually, right? So just f3. I'm chilling. No need to rush. I'm winning. My opponent plays e4. A good move. I cannot take because now the g4 knight would hang, but I don't have to take. So I take this time to play rook takes on h7, best move. He plays e3. Now it's important here. I cannot go about my plan of maybe playing rook here and stopping the pawn, because then he has f5, right? That hits the rook here on e7 and also hits the knight here on g4. I cannot play that. So now, so also if I play something like rook here, he can play e2, and then after king f2, then he plays rook to e8, and then bishop h4 check is coming soon. In fact, bishop e7, yes, bishop h4 check might be the best move, and then upon g3, just bishop takes here. So let me show you a line. So it'd be a blunder for me to play something, let's say like rook g7. Yeah, if I played something like rook g7, this is lost because, well, the engine says it's a draw, but I thought to myself just e2. Maybe there's a way to hold this. This is interesting. I didn't even analyze this. Okay, now rook e7, but like if king f2, I thought after rook here, if I play like queen promote, and then he can basically just promote with check, and this is losing. Yes, I can't even promote, but like I didn't really want to fatigue myself with funny calculations. So after all of that, sorry, rook check and then f3, after e4 I just played king f1, which was the best move. This gives the advantage. f5, now knight goes. So also here you understand, if bishop takes, right, I have the immediate knight c6 or d7. In fact, not d7, but in fact I do have d7, because if rook takes, knight f6 check, and then the rook picks up the rook here, right? I will pick up the rook there. So here after knight e5, he goes rook e8, best move king e2, right? Because if I move the knight there, let's say to there, this is losing because now I cannot stop the pawn from marching. Check. If I go here or there, here's just the bishop check, right? So this is losing. It's never too late to blunder the game. So I play the best move. I play king e2 because he cannot take my knight. So the knight is protected by the pawn promotion, which is just epically insane. King e2, right on time. Now I have to move my knight. After bishop f6, now the knight needs to go because then he's threatening to actually take with the bishop. The knight d7, king g6, rook. First here f g3. I won't really go into so much of the intricacies of the move orders here. You can analyze that because this video is already long and I'm just showing you a game of how it materialized, all from just having a backward pawn, right? Anyway, I'll just click the forward arrow. After this check, my opponent resigned actually because king can go here, but then there's just this knight check, right? Really sad position to play. So what we have discovered throughout these 3 games, I wanted to show the 2 Grandmaster games and 1 game of my own, is how powerful you can launch an attack and how devastating it can be if your opponent has backward pawns, right? In this series, basically, we're gonna be looking at a lot of positions that you have to understand, like we discussed from the beginning, right? The Nimzo Indian pawn structures. We had discussed Nimzo Indian pawn structures. We discussed Benko Gambit pawn structures, which I play. This is the Nimzo Indian pawn structure, by the way. We had also discussed a lot of themes, basically, and we're going to be going through all of these. So what is important, actually, let me just show that to you quickly. This is the Nimzo Indian pawn structures. So we've discussed these pawn structures. We have discussed well, we haven't discussed these Nimzo Indian, but I've sort of showed you the examples. This is the Benko, this is the Sheveshnikov game that we just looked at from my game, and how to actually utilize the square in front of the pawn, right? So we're going to be diving deep into these pawn themes in the next couple of days. We're going to be diving deep into them. I hope you guys stick around with me. We're going to have so much fun. So just to do a quick recap, these are the dynamic elements that are involved when you have backward pawns. The weak side has passivity, which is lack of piece activity, as they must be defended. There's piece mobility, right, which is another dynamic element. Pieces are usually cramped for the defending side, as you've seen in the games where pieces were back or behind the pawns. There were bishops on e7. It was messy. Then they have less space. I enjoyed more space in my game that we just recapped. I had the initiative for the better side. We've seen Dahl demonstrate that. Salzburg also demonstrating that against Larson in the previous game, right? And it all stems from these 2 key strategic elements, right, of backward pawns. Is the fact that the pawn in front, I mean the square, right, this over here, the square in front of the pawn is weak, and the pawn itself is also weak. You need to know how to strategically apply pressure and actually convert the position. Now, by no means are backward pawns a taboo must not have. No. They can still be used. We will go through that and how you can actually use them to advantage as the defending side, maybe to break free and launch an attack to create counterplay and those sort of things. But this is going to be a long series. This video is long as it is. I don't know how long this video is. I didn't hope for it to be this long, but we're going to be diving deep into backward pawns. We're going to be investigating them going forward. I hope you guys found value in this video, and if you've been watching until this very end, thank you so much. Please do consider hitting that like button, pump up the elo, press that like button, because more elo, everybody wants more elo. Even Magnus Carlsen wants more elo, and he's already like the greatest chess player of all time. So if you just pump up the stock, pump up the elo, press that like button, you know, more elo points for me, more elo points for you, more elo points for the YouTube algorithm, more elo points for everybody. Everybody wins. Okay, I don't know what to tell you, everybody wins. Okay, I'm going on here on a bit of a rant. I'm gonna end this video right here. We're gonna be doing more advanced positions in the next upcoming videos in the series. I hope you guys had a great time. Until next time, kings and queens, I will see you. Have a good one. Cheers.